welcome. Thank you for coming out on such a dreary night. I really appreciate it. We want to get started. We have a pretty packed house and we have a packed program, so we really want to get started. So thank you again for coming. We're so excited to have you here. We really appreciate your showing up when it's been raining out and it's cold and dark. So thank you. You get gold stars for showing up. I'm Ellen Edwards, chair of the Bronxville Green Committee, and we are an all-volunteer organization that works with the village trustees to propose and run programs that promote environmental health and sustainability in our community. You might know us from the Giving Garden, or Take Back Day, or the Food Scrap Recycling Program. In 2022, we gained bronze certification in the New York State Climate Smart Communities program, and we are slowly making our way to silver certification. Tonight's program is being brought to you in partnership with the Bronxville Adult School, which has served as a really remarkable resource in our community for more than 50 years. The artwork on the walls, which just went up today, is all done by adult school students. So I hope you'll take a look at it later after the program and really appreciate it. So many, many thanks to Victoria Thiessen and the adult school. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce our two speakers today. For much of his career, Bram Gunther was chief of forestry, horticulture, and natural resources in the New York City parks, where he executed major projects such as green streets and million trees. Now Bram serves as VP of Science and Development at Planet Wild, a Bedford-based landscape design firm which believes that private landowners are leaders in the next wave of conservation, and that the transformation begins in our own backyards. Bram has a master's degree from Yale's School of Environment, and his depth of knowledge and experience are really remarkable. We are so incredibly fortunate to have him here today. Our second speaker, Leslie Needham, runs her own landscape design firm, Leslie Needham Design, which also has a strong emphasis on sustainable design. Her home landscape, River Hills, is on the Smithsonian Institute Archives of American Gardens. Leslie has a landscape design certificate from the New York Botanical Garden, where she has also taught in the program. She writes and speaks widely, and her award-winning work has been featured in the New York Times, Martha Stewart, and Gardenista, among others. In past years, on open garden days, I've had the privilege of visiting Leslie's garden twice, and each time I've been blown away by its stunning beauty. We are especially lucky and honored to have her today. And I have to say, she's a real trooper, because just this afternoon, her daughter gave birth to a little boy, and she's here anyway. So before I invite Bram and Leslie up to speak, followed by a short Q&A, I would like to thank our incomparable mayor, Mary Marvin, for her unstinting support. Really, we ask and she says yes. It's a great relationship. So she has graciously offered to say just a few words to kick us off tonight. So please welcome Mayor Marvin.
Thank you, Ellen. I just really wanted to thank our Green Committee and thank the Adult School, because they are just two of the best institutions we have, and they really galvanize us as trustees. I see my fellow trustee, Helen Knapp, right there. And I just wanted to share that in the village, and thanks to them, we use no chemicals or pesticides on any village property. And we got the Bronxville School and the Reformed Church to join us in that, and of course the library. We have a wonderful mulching in place program, and we have our compost program. And thanks to the Green Committee's push, our new DPW building is going to be outfitted, refitted completely with solar panels that will power the entire village hall. So, and this is all thanks to, and I don't want to speak too much because we have incredible professionals, and we can do more, and we're here to learn from the two of you. But I want to put in a plug for our new right-of-way tree program. We partnered with the Historical Conservancy. So if any of you see a place in the village, business district, in front of your house, in front of your co-op, call us at Village Hall, go on our website, and we are partnering with you, sharing most of the cost and restoring the village canopy, because we looked back at photos 40 and 50 years ago, and it's really sad due to storms, disease, and age. So we have this new program, and all you have to do is give us a spot, and we will come in, put native trees, proper trees, and I just hope you'll work with us, because it's all going to happen this spring. And I'm just waiting for one of us to see the first crocus. So, and thank you everyone for being here. And I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Bram first. Thank you.
While I'm waiting, thank you for having me. I want to introduce Caprice, raise her hand. She's Planet Wild's Director of Ecological Administration. Every office needs an administrator. But her background is in environmental biology, so she really does know how to administrate ecology. All right, let's see. Do I need the glasses? I think I do, unfortunately. So I'm honored to present with you, Leslie. Leslie is going to walk you through a lot of the on-the-ground best practices, but I'm sort of going to frame tonight. And I should say the most significant moment in my life as it relates to what I am doing now. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Is in the end of 2019. I retired after 28 years of New York City Parks Department service. And I went on the board of directors of this nonprofit that I founded in New York City called the Natural Areas Conservancy. And for the first time in my life, I became a full-time suburbanite. I am a city boy through and through, born and raised on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, but at the end of the career, I needed a quieter space. I needed a little bit more country just directly next to me. However, I took with me from the city, in my muscle memory, my mental memory is maybe the best way to put it, how I learned to understand and analyze the New York City landscape. And I took that lens with me, how could I not, to suburbia. And so I've applied that lens, and it is that small scale open spaces surrounded by development are not only legitimate, they are necessary and critical for ecological restoration and conservation. So that's fundamentally what I'm going to talk about now. All that work in the city, my training, I'm trained as a conservation ecologist with some forestry mixed in there too. All that training and my experience, of course, went into the development and the formation of Planet Wild. We have been around for 7 years. For about the last 3 years, we've been using our current business model, and we have, and fundamentally, we design, ecologically restore, and monitor sites, campuses, yards, commercial space, municipal space in Westchester and Fairfield County, hundreds of sites. However, as you can see from the slide, our vision is national, and we believe that this manicured space that we call the lawn is critical to reaching environmental, health, and sustainability goals. We envision millions of acres of lawn and turf transformed into native habitat across the country, and it starts with your yard, my yard, and your neighbor's yard. All right, where is this? Next slide. By the way, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to interrupt me with questions, do so, but I know that probably throws off the timing. Okay, so let's start with a little of the grim stuff. Not that I necessarily need to remind you, but it is good to be reminded that we are losing nature. In losing nature, we are losing a part of ourselves. We've lost billions of acres of forest. We've lost billions of birds. We keep drinking from the spigot of pesticides, but not Bronxville, so I commend you for that. And if you look at the quote on the slide, in 20 years, the fleeting time it takes for a human baby to grow into a young adult, the country has lost 22% of its butterflies. Yet, we see the solution to this planetary problem here in our own communities, in our own backyards. Sorry. Yes, believe it or not, the new conservation frontier is the American lawn. 44 million acres of, at least 44 million acres of lawn and turf across the country, millions of acres more if you include warehouse spaces, campuses, and commercial spaces. Nearly 60% of the land in the United States is in private hands, 80% east of the Mississippi. And some of that private land is still ecologically intact and robust, but most of it, particularly in our suburban and ex-urban areas, really could stand restoration now. And imagine that every open space, public and private, in Bronxville is rewilded to some extent. Let's take it home. Like you imagine in your own hometown. The amount of trees, the future canopy cover, as the mayor was talking about, would be significant. Imagine all the new pollinators and birds coming to Bronxville because word has spread that it's good to live here and eat here and reproduce here. Imagine all the increased carbon capture and stormwater management. Bronxville as a community wants to be sustainable, is sustainable, and I see that from your programs and your mandates. So here's another way to message this effort: the power of the yard in restoring the planet. And the timing is right. Lawns are out, rewilding is in. If there was a silver lining to the pandemic, it's that 18 million more of us are now gardening, either rediscovering gardening or discovering gardening. The rewilding movement in suburbia is a natural extension of the urban environmental movement that kicked in, at least for me, in New York City in the late 1990s, and completely shifted policy, programs, and the landscape of the city to be more ecologically rich. In ecology, we use the urban-rural gradient. It's a formal formula that we use to understand the dynamics and the interconnection between the city, suburbia, and the rural area. Much of environmental investment in the United States has originally gone into our great national parks, into our national forests. As I just said, in the 1990s, it started to find its way into our cities, and now it is being extended to suburbia, as it should be. And this timing, the trend of rewilding, has gotten Planet Wild on the Today Show and in the New York Times last year. And I say that's just emblematic. Okay, so let's take a brief leap into history. Why lawns in the first place? At least according to the history books, it's first started to appear in the 1700s with the British and French aristocracy. And you can see by the top picture up there, it's really a show of power over the land. It is flat, it's lifeless. It translated in a positive way in the 1800s here in America through people like Frederick Law Olmsted. And if you don't know who he is, he's the designer of Central Park and Prospect Park, just local examples. He's done many parks across the country. He saw this open space as the democratic commons, which is obviously quite positive. I can tell you for a fact, even though he died 100 years before I was born, that he would never design that. His vision of open spaces was very different. And then in World War I, when we were developing chemical warfare, all those kind of chemical innovations turned into products in mainstream society. And a lot were over time created for the lawn. And you can see, without the chemicals, it would be hard to keep that flat and lifeless space. I refer to it as flat and uniform and lifeless. However, the yard also has a very democratic history. And like Olmsted perceived it in World War II, the Victory Gardens were used as a way to feed individual families and communities. Michelle Obama used the yard as a way to try to get people to eat healthier by growing their own fruits and vegetables. And we are now in the era of the new rewilded yard, and it will never be anything else as far as I'm concerned. And the yard features large in the history of the American landscape. There are 85 million households with yards. We invest a lot in our yards with an increasing focus on sustainability. According to our research, there's about 20 million folks that fall into this very broad category of the eco-curious. But you can see some of the data, 19% more people from the 85 million number are converting their lawns to native landscapes. 34% are purchasing plants to help with wildlife. 25% specifically buying native plants. So we are trending in the right direction. So after that, which is sort of, framework for you, as I said, let's take it back to you. How healthy is your yard? How healthy can it be? And again, I want to emphasize, you'll hear more about on-the-ground best practices from Leslie. But for us, the first action is to commit to getting rid of some of your lawn. Not all of it, but some of it. That's where you need to start. It can be on any scale and any scope. For the first 2 to 3 years of Planet Wild, we were advocating for and selling prefabricated 5x5 sites. Start small with something that you can manage, 1 tree, 3 shrubs, some native wildflowers. Start there. If you like it and you feel like you can do it, you will then add on to it. Each 5x5 plot adds up. If you have 20 acres, restore all of that. Any rewilding at all will move the dial, move the needle towards biodiversity and environmental health. And the biggest barrier to entry in our experience, but also according to the literature, is where do I start? For us, for Planet Wild, the answer is with our Wilder score. It is a tool that we developed that assesses your land and gives you a score for the ecological value of it now and its potential to be restored. As you can see, the Wilder system is based upon using 4 different strands of data: ecosystem services, habitat diversity, biodiversity, and yard management, which are the decisions that landowners make. Do you use pesticides or not? How often do you mow? All of these individual sub-scores are combined, weighted, and tallied into an overall score here of 41. And you can see the sub-scores. So the person who, I think this is probably made up, but the 56 for yard management shows that person's sort of half the way there in their decisions about how they manage the lawn. And this system is backed by Doug Tallamy. He has been on our science advisory board for the last 4 years, so he's helped us develop this system. Okay. I'm going to take a brief pivot into trees and forests. I show this slide as an example of how private space can bleed into public space or vice versa. It's a way to see Bronxville for purposes of increasing its tree canopy and environmental benefits. Like I described before, imagine if all properties throughout the town are rewilded to some extent, what a difference it would make. This is the vision of Doug Tallamy and Homegrown National Park, where all our yards across the country are interconnected in an emerald necklace, but community by community, home by home. The forest is also for us representative of a vertical design versus a traditional horizontal design. And we are trying to push this vertical design as a primary part of rewilding. Trees and shrubs are the workhorses of a healthy ecological yard. It is the forest that captures the carbon, that manages the stormwater, that filters pollutants, that reduces temperatures sometimes up to 10 to 15 degrees. In terms of biodiversity, an oak tree is home to over 500 caterpillars that fall into the leaf litter in the spring and become the moths and butterflies that inhabit our yards in the summer. The black cherry tree, almost forgotten as a kind of weedy tree, is the home to over 400 caterpillars. And the forest is not exclusive of wildflowers, of ground cover, of ferns, whatever else you want, but the trees are dominant in this area and these landscapes. And that translates into easier maintenance over time, because after 2 to 3 years of establishment, they're mainly okay. You'd have to watch out for invasive species coming in, but they don't need the same level of maintenance as a complex garden or a meadow. So for us, our push towards trees and forests is represented by our Pocket Forest or Sustainable Campus program. Our program here is based on the Miyawaki method. I don't know if people have heard that term, but the Miyawaki method was developed in Tokyo in the 1970s and 80s to reclaim industrial space. And it is based on planting very densely, which fosters rapid growth, which is where you get the low maintenance from. These pocket forests act as a kind of buffer to invasive species, although the data is still out on that, but we think it can. It definitely acts as a vector or as a hub for species coming in and looking for corridors through the region as they're seeding biodiversity. And they are an ideal way to reclaim urban open spaces, as I talked about in the beginning. And this school in Bridgeport, Connecticut is a perfect example. This is another school in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We got a grant with the Aspetuck Land Trust through the state of Connecticut's Climate Smart Forestry program to do 7 public schools. It starts with that lifeless flat lawn. It's always planted with students and teachers and the community. Miyawaki specifies in his method, but I think we know this intuitively anyway. It has to be embedded in the community. You then get a baby pocket forest, the top right slide. And this is the forest now. It's from a drone, but it is some of the trees after 3 years are already 9 to 10 feet tall. This is a small pocket forest that we did at the Sewanoi Elementary School in Pelham, not that far away. And it's a wonderful model. We were solicited by the PTA. They paid for it. It was approved by the principal, of course, planted by students, the PTA, teachers, and administrators, maintained by the PTA and students. You should see them out there. They're incredible. And 2 5th grade classes are collecting wilder data for the next 2 years for us, which is incredible. So we love that model. Another example is a pocket forest in a 5,000 square foot pocket park in an industrial section in Norwalk, Connecticut. In fact, where that forest is now, was just planted last October, was a basketball court, but it was not functional any longer. And this is a community in Norwalk that has 9% canopy cover in the neighborhood. Just to give you a reference, the average is about 20 to 25 for most cities. They'd like, New York City is at 22 now. I'm the city boy, we'd like to be at 30%. 9% is really low. And this was done in partnership with the City of Norwalk, the Norwalk Watershed and River Association, and also funded by a Connecticut Climate Smart Forestry grant. And last on the forest, we are also planting them on private property. This was a client in Mount Kisco who had a standard suburban plot. She didn't want to see, she wanted a hedgerow, she didn't want to see the road anymore. 2 years ago, it would have been privet. But when she came to us, we said, let's do a native hedgerow, which is really a pocket forest. This was just planted last year, so it's small. But I show this one to see that it doesn't need to be on forest scale. People have a sense of the forest on a large scale, and yes, that's what it was traditionally. But not now. In our new landscapes, in these small spaces, in developed areas, this is where we're going to get forest. And so it comes back to Wilder, which I mentioned before. We collect data in the way that I mentioned before on all the sites that we plant. That data feeds directly into our designs, our specifications, our way of making decisions at a company, and our marketing and communications. However, that's a blank slide. It's not supposed to be. Where's my less lawn, more life slide? Okay, I'm going to have to hold it up. Less lawn, more life. Less lawn, more life challenge. Last year we held our 3rd annual Less Lawn, More Life challenge. It's our way to get rewilders into action. And for last year we took this field-based methodology, Wilder, which I just showed you, and turned it into a 5-minute quiz that is a self-assessment for any landowner. And last year, during the challenge, we had over 18,000 people in 49 states take this Wilder self-assessment. So we realized how popular it was. What's the only state that no one took Wilder in?
Alabama.
Alabama's one guess. Another guess?
Texas.
I thought it was Alaska, but it is Hawaii. But we'll get to Hawaii. And so that...
We're doing all right.
We're doing okay, yes. But the reaction to the self-assessment just revealed for us this desire, this percolating desire for people to use their own land as a way to address climate issues, community health issues, but to have direct control over it. And now, with this winter, we were able to raise money to create the Wilder app, a free backyard habitat guide for each homeowner in America. And the app also has group accounts. I'm speaking to the city now. Just for an example, the Cincinnati Zoo is using Wilder, creating their own platform within the system to track progress on the zoo and the community's efforts towards restoration and conservation. They see using the data to support local policy, programs, practices, and inspire rewilding. So the same could happen here. This is... Oh, that didn't come out either, did it? Sorry. Well, it's supposed to say that Wilder will have a whole bunch of features, like what's your yard personality, learn your own style of design, what's happening in the region ecologically, are endangered species making their way back in? Maybe you want to use those types of plants. What are your neighbors doing? Community challenges. Maybe for a week everybody is challenged to turn off their lights at night, particularly when the birds are migrating. So these are the type of features that you will have in Wilder, which is going to be unveiled. This didn't come out either. There's supposed to be a QR code because it's going to be unveiled when we hold our 4th annual Less Lawn, More Life challenge, which will start in May. And we are giving everyone the QR code, so we'll get it to you another way because it's going to be the beta version of the app, and we want your feedback. We want you to tell us where it's working, where it's not working, because we want it to work for everybody. And so please join us. Thank you very much for having me. I turn it over to Leslie, who is going to tell you much more about how to do it on the actual ground. I just framed it for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bram, and thank you, Bronxville Green, for inviting me. And you all are an amazing community led by an extraordinary mayor, and this is what this is all about. We all need to be active, active agents of change in light of everything that we're facing in our environment right now. I think Bram's talked about it. There's been loss of habitat. You know, our climate is changing. It's unpredictable. You know, we have drought, we have rain, we don't have winter, but then we have winter. We have different horticultural zones. And I think if we all lean into this and we embrace it and we work together as a community, we can affect great change. And what I want to do with you today is give you some case studies and examples on how we've done that on properties that we worked. I am a landscape designer based in Bedford, New York. I'm lucky enough to work not only on my own garden, but many gardens with fabulous clients. So one of the first most important things is let's really think our American infatuation with the green lawn. Lawns are a monoculture, excuse me, that require water. It is the #1 irrigated crop in the United States, lawn. It takes way too much water, it takes way too many resources, it has to be mowed weekly. It also has to have a lot of pesticides and poisons to stay green. We can do better, and that's what I want to talk about. There's some exciting ways that you can reduce lawn. I always, as a designer, I love a drone. It shows you your property from the bird's eye, and if you don't have a drone, I promise you, you know a kid that does, and you can hire them. But this is actually our property many years ago by the house. We had a lot of lawn, and I thought, how can I continue to squeeze it? Again, following that Doug Talame, he's a great scientist. I hope many of you are familiar with him, great author. But he really talks about if everyone in the United States was to reduce their lawn in half, we would and replaced it with native plants, we would increase by 20 million acres. I mean, this is a lot. This is the homegrown national park effort. We all have lawn we can shrink. And once you shrink it, like where are places to look? Under trees. And again, we talk about, if you want to get into this, start small, 5 by 5. You have probably some great trees that you may be just mulching right now or using lawn. Make a circle. Replace that with a combination of native perennials. And what happens, which Bram also referred to, if you do this under a keystone tree are these native trees that you all are planting throughout your community. But instead of underneath your native keystone tree, you are to plant native perennials. You're creating a full ecosystem right there, and it's easy to do. So, as you're planting those trees throughout the community, maybe we're gonna put in soft landings underneath it too. And this is an example of how I did it actually even on our property. As I started to remove all the lawn, I looked at it, this is a dogwood. I could do a combination of small perennials, these are small oak leaf hydrangeas, with natural native phlox, Papyrus aurea, and a whole combination. And the great thing is, it holds the water, you don't need to weed it, you don't need to mulch it, and again, it's a full ecosystem. So this whole idea of planting heavily underneath trees is a very easy thing to institute in smaller properties. And just more examples of it. Again, this is a native dogwood, fothergilla, combinations of phloxes, asters, and as I say, they grow in, and there's no room for weeds, and it also holds water. So it's a much more beneficial ground cover than traditional lawn. Again, another way. And this again was all lawn at one point, but we just did this native combination of grasses, perennials, and flowering plants. And the other thing, it stays up all season. You do not have to mow it. And again, another example of multi-planting under trees. But these are 4-season, they hold the water, and then, they don't need to be mowed on a weekly basis, and they don't require the fertilizers or the pesticides. It's a great alternative. And it's, again, if you do it just around your trees to start, it's a very easy thing to institute. This is a great combination that I saw at the New York Botanical Garden, because everyone says, oh, you need so much sun, but this is in dry shade, and it's, albicans, a fern, and a hellebore, and that will look good all 4 seasons. And again, it's just a great alternative to lawn. And I like to say, let's think of our lawns as a throw rug. This is a picture from England, but I think it just institutes like this little small visual of a lawn has much more impact if instead of that whole area being green. This is a great example, I think, of a shag throw rug. This is prairie dropseed in Bedford, New York. And look how beautiful that is. It frames the house. You can mow traditional lawn around it. But again, 4 season, you don't have to mow it. It's beautiful in the winter, it turns brown, it gets cut once a year. No fertilizers, it holds the water. It's a great alternative to traditional monoculture lawn. You know, as you spend time in this sphere thinking about like how do we change, there's a tradition of a tapestry hedge in England, and I don't know if you know what that is, but a tapestry hedge is when you grow a lot of plants together and you shear them, and they start out like this, they grow together, and then they're tightly sheared. And I thought, like, I think we need to start thinking of our lawns as tapestry lawns. It doesn't have to be a monoculture. And this is, again, that shag rug that I showed you. Later on in the season, we have some salvias going up, we had penstemon, and it's a really beautiful tapestry. And again, such a great alternative to the monoculture of lawn. Community, this is great. As I've been doing this at our house, I was going for a walk, and I noticed a sign on my neighbor's property. She had Pachysandra all along the road that she was ripping up, and in turn, putting in this combination of great native perennials. So much like Bronxville, I think we've got to build these communities. And again, it touches on Doug Talamay, who talks about if we combine our properties, we are increasing the biodiversity, we are increasing the food sources for the birds and the butterflies that make our properties their home. You know, it's at my house, it's at my neighbor's house, we're now working to spread it further in our neighborhood. But again, it's a beautiful, healthy alternative to traditional lawn grass. And you know, this is in the fall when it's all full of asters. The grasses are all gold in the winter. And she even's done labels, which I love, educating, showing me, you know, building community and maybe making people engage in the landscape. More native and beneficial plants. Yes, we've talked about, you know, once you remove your lawn, what do you put in? Bram gave you great suggestions of these trees and these pocket forests. But I think, you know, we can also do it with perennials. And I want to show you this example. So this was a property I worked on. This is a woodland. There is nothing beneficial. This is like a dry desert. No soft landings here. And we thought, okay, this is a great opportunity. I mean, and this is not such a large scale, but you could even reduce that. When you see areas maybe that are fringe on your property where nothing's growing, there's opportunity. So the first thing we did is we mapped it all out. I thought we got to reduce the lawn. You know, we flagged it out, raked out all the leaves because, again, leaves are a great source of food. Like, I'm sure you're all aware of this whole effort of leave the leaves. Don't remove your leaves from your property. We raked the leaves out here, flagged it out, brought in plugs. And again, I don't know if you know what plugs are. They're small plants, and when you're doing larger plantings like this, they're very economical, but they're also ecologically sound. We were planting under large trees. A lot of times they're roots, so you want to bring in some very small plants. They don't require quite as much watering as like the 1 or 3 gallon plants. You have to water them regularly, but not as intensely as the larger plants. There they are in with the leaf mulch to hold them down. Starting to come in the first season. No full irrigation system. We use sprinklers, but once you get this established, you don't need irrigation systems. Again, I think water is a true resource. We all have to start to really consider how we're using it. So this gets irrigated with sprinklers. You start to see it come in, and now this is what it is. And again, it's gone from having absolutely no benefit or no beauty to becoming a food source, a habitat, and also aesthetically pleasing. And it doesn't need to be mowed. It doesn't need irrigation. It doesn't need pesticides or poison. And it has multi-season interest. And this application can happen on a 5x5, on a property edge, just any area where nothing is happening, or it could be better, or you could rip out the lawn. And you know, it's got a lot of interest, and asters in the fall. I want to talk about a small project I did in Bedford because I think maybe some of you have ever been to the Oho Firehouse in Bedford for coffee or tea. Okay, good. I invite you to come. But I did this is a collaboration with a very good friend and a fellow designer, Paige Dickey. So this is and was the firehouse in Bedford, New York, up until 6 years ago. Blacktop, you know, that's where the fire trucks went in and out, in the middle of town, this quaint village. And they built a new fire department and said it was sold, and they made it into a retail establishment and thought, you know, we want to make the outside an engaging place to sit. So we ripped it all out. This is where we were. We started to look for inspiration, and of course, is there better inspiration than France? So we thought we have to have it where people can sit out, but we want to interpret this traditional idea in a native way. So we brought in hawthorn trees, again, native trees, planted them after taking all the blacktop out, planted them in. We did a stone dust, again, very inspired by France, but stone dust because the water goes in. These trees don't need irrigation. The water, every time it rains, like in the beginning, the first year, yes, I needed supplemental irrigation, but the water goes through. So it's no longer blacktop where the water runs off. Again, I know you're thinking about this in your community in Bronxville as you're planting trees, but holding water and keeping water is so important. So, and we surrounded it with a small fence with espalier apples, all underplanted with the native perennials. So again, it's really taking a traditional spot, very like sort of formal and urban like Bronxville, but you can interpret it in a way that is healthy and beneficial to our environment, and also pleasing to look at. This place is packed, and it's really engaging. So I think there are so many ways to interpret this desire to do it better. Now, I will say these landscapes read a slightly bit wilder than our more traditional mowed lawns, Pachysandra. And I think it's important that we signal intention, that we give people cues for care, especially as we start to do it in communities with HOAs. We have to tell people that we're doing this on purpose. And I think there are a few cues that we always use in the studio to show that, yes, this landscape might be a little wilder, much to the benefit of everything, but it hasn't just gone to rack and ruin. And how we do that is, one, we keep our edges crisp. You know, I like this yin and yang. This is a gravel terrace. Again, it's not bluestone. The water goes through. Trees are growing up. It's a series of 8 trees. But everything around it is native. I mean, there are some boxwood among the native. But as those get wilder, that yin and yang of the gravel, you know, straight, clean edge really is a great complement to these wilder landscapes. And again, a rock path. I am very careful. I'm trying to now do gravel joints when I do hard paths, so that, again, the water goes through the path. I'm always thinking about, how do I keep water on site? How can I replace plants with more beneficial selections? Another thing for legibility in these landscapes is creating focal points. You know, you can do that through a water feature, a couple of finials that lead the eye. As I always say, it's like a frame. As this meadow below gets wilder in the season, you know, those finials frame your view shed. You can do a couple of chairs. It can be really simple. You know, put chairs under a tree that has a great soft landing. Even, you know, I say an objet or a piece of art. This is in our meadow, and we have these big spheres that we, you know, they focus your eye. They're nothing fancy, but they focus your eye as the landscape gets a little bit wilder as things grow in. Easy to create woodland teepees, and this can be, again, on Bronxville, you know, on a property edge as you're cleaning it out. You don't have to remove this wood, and if you strategically put them, they're actually very beautiful. And you're keeping the biomass on, you're creating habitat, and keeping the food sources. Paths. Paths are the easiest thing to do to show intention in these wilder landscapes, and you can easily just mow them. You know, and again, like, I think this is the example, like, if that was all ferns, which would be so healthy and great for, you know, all the reasons we've talked about, you wouldn't feel like you could enter that landscape. But I think by putting the path in, you just want to go around it. So I'm always, doing paths, especially as we're creating these environments that are, as I say, a little bit wilder. You want people to engage in them. So I think a path is a very welcoming way to do it. And again, it can be done through mowing, through wood chips, stone. And I bring this because I love it. It's a very formal brick herringbone. And I think, Bronxville has a lot of formality to it. But it's surrounded by a very wild native plant palette. That is sumacs with Cape Breeze grasses. And I think it's a beautiful combination and sort of, again, the yin and the yang with a very formal hardscape. Take a seat. If we're going to do this landscape, let's benefit and enjoy it. We're building these landscapes for more birds, more bugs, more butterflies. Let's enjoy it. If we're, so I always try and put seats throughout any landscape. These are benches that we had made for a woodland. Again, all the wood was felled there, and we just had them milled. There was a neighbor with a portable mill, and he created all these benches that we threw out throughout the woodlands. You can find old benches anywhere. Put them in these landscapes that you're allowing to grow and to have a heartbeat. Sit and witness that heartbeat. And actually, you can also sit and do your Wilder score. You can really see the benefit of these landscapes. I think it's so important. And they can be done in formal ways or informal way. And then, finally, in closing, I always say closing the loop. We're all so aware of what we eat. And I think everyone's now like, oh my gosh, I have a credit card of plastic in my brain. What about all the plastic we're bringing on our landscapes? We are, bringing in mulch. We're bringing in fertilizer. We're bringing in, foods and all that. Nature does it. And if we start to keep all of that on our properties and compost, we don't have to bring those bags of plastic on. So I really think, I always call this compost to me is a gateway drug into all of this, because once you see you don't throw all that stuff away and what you get from it, it's a really easy first step. So I think you close the loop and you do it in so many ways. I want to show you, this is an example of a larger close the loop. We've talked about losing all these trees. At our house, we had to take down about 30 ash trees because of the emerald ash borer, and they were very dangerous. Now, we could have milled them, we could have taken them down, paid to have them all hauled out, but we were building this barn, and we thought, well, why don't we mill them all? And indeed, we milled the trees. So again, it's like closing the loop. We kept this wood, we used it. This is actually all stone from site, too. So this is sort of a larger way of thinking about keeping, all this stuff on site. Again, building benches. I love this. This is an edge, actually, in England. Obviously, trees were cut down, but instead of cutting them and having them all hauled off, they thought, well, why don't we create an edge to the parking court there? And I think it's pretty great looking. I think it also ties in with the landscape beyond. Here's a close-up of it. And this is pretty great, I thought. We all need a bike rack like this. But again, it's just, you can have creative reuse of all the material that your property generates. And this, again, was a compost bin that I built out of wood that we had milled, and it's pretty beautiful, I think. I had to take down on a project a lot of trees. This was after Storm Sandy. Again, these trees all had to be cut. We could have paid, to have them taken out. All those trucks could have taken it. But instead, we had them all chopped. We created these bins, large-scale bins for compost, over a series of years. This all broke down, returned to the earth, and it was a benefit to the property and also a cost savings. Again, closing that loop. There's no need to be taking all this material off and then bringing it back into plastic bags. I always make secret spots to stash stuff. I suggest you do that on any scale property. And, this is slightly a larger pile, but they can be smaller. And it's so beneficial. And again, it's those leaves that we all want to keep. I think they're great to keep in your perennial beds off the season, but sometimes you have to get them off that little throw rug of lawn that you now have, or some of the gravel terraces. And then you just keep them in piles, and then indeed they can become mulch in the following spring. And again, it's large debris, smaller debris, and then compost. As I say, this is the gateway drug into this whole initiative in my mind. I always take pictures. I used to take pictures of like very formal boxwood gardens and all that. Now when I see like great ways of keeping leaves on site or mulching, that's what I take. But this is someone that just is collecting leaves in a woodland. I thought that's not bad looking. This was in Paris, and if it's chic enough for Paris, it's definitely chic enough for us. And that's what I want to close with, is just, I'm so in awe of what you're doing as a community. I hope that maybe Bram and I have inspired you on things you can incorporate on your own landscape. But we just are really excited that this community is growing and starting, and that you all are a part of it. And thank you for inviting us here tonight to talk about it.
So thank you, Leslie and Bram. We have just like a few minutes for like 2 or 3 questions. Right there.
Hi.
Okay.
So you spoke about leaving the leaves and maybe even storing them somewhere, and then they turn into mulch.
They break down. So,
But let me get it out.
yeah, okay, good.
So we're in an apartment, a group of apartment buildings, and leaving the leaves would make it look like a mess, in my opinion. Because, so how do you deal with that?
I think that's a really good question, and a good concern, because you know what, if it looks like a mess, everyone's gonna, and like they don't understand it, everyone's walking away from this whole effort. I think if in your apartment building you have perennial beds, I don't know if you do, leaving leaves in that over the winter, it can be done neatly. I mean, I agree they shouldn't spill out, but
Don't they blow out?
I think once they get settled, my experience has been, yeah, you have to watch it a little bit in the beginning, but you get them in. But then those leaves that are maybe on the lawns or the terraces, I would suggest you get together and you build a great compost system and get people to understand that we want to save this, because what will happen is when those leaves get put back there, they do begin to break down. And then it becomes like finer mulch that you can use in the springs when you plant. So again, there's a little bit of education, but making sure it's intentional. And I do think building a good compost bin and actually putting signage up is really helpful. And again, it's akin to like people all of a sudden were questioning all the plastic we're consuming, but we're doing that on our properties too. So we should be questioning that, I think.
Okay, 2 quick follow-ups. Are you supposed to like chop up the leaves?
Well, this is what I love about this field, is it's like we're always learning. And there have been studies, and I don't know if you're familiar with Margaret Roach, but she's had a wonderful scientist, and I'm going to let Bram take over from this because he is the scientist. There's a lot of life that happens when the leaves are whole. So then there's been like, should you break them up? Well, but you can't leave them whole everywhere. I still think by keeping them in piles, I would keep them whole in those piles. But I think what we don't want you to do is take them, put them in a truck, and drive them away.
Okay,
So
last, I promise last. You say compost heap, does that mean a heap of just leaves, or do you need compost added in?
So I do just a leaf pile as one part, but then compost is made up of nitrogen and carbon. Carbon, a great source of carbon are dried leaves. So you can also use carbon, I mean, you can use leaves in your compost system. So but I think those leaves alone, I do mulch my leaves separately by themselves. Have I covered everything?
Yeah.
Could you add to that? But keep them on your, I love that you're thinking about it. Just build a good looking bin so your community gets involved with it, your apartment building.
The only thing that is, it is circumstantial. Depending upon where you're living and what your aesthetics are, the mulching process can be different for you. You can cut, a lot of our clients want us to mow them and then put them more neatly around the beds. And other clients just want to leave it as it is. The fundamental point, as Leslie was making, is close the loop. Nothing that is there now, which all comes from nature, needs to be carted away by big trucks that are spewing carbon that go to a landfill. That process has to end because it's making us sick. So just figure out a way that works for your circumstances to leave the leaves.
Right.
And to save the town some money.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's
Right.
Okay, way in the back. One more question, way in the back.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Is there an alternative to traditional grass that you could sit on, lie down on, have picnics on? I feel like that's one of the part of the appeal of having a traditional lawn, is to be on it.
I'll start. I mean, Leslie and I are not advocating no lawn.
Right.
We do understand, and neither is Doug Talonay. We do know that the lawn is a place for recreation, for people to get together. Even Frederick Law Olmsted wants the open space for people to gather. We are talking about, I think Leslie used the word shrinking it. We're talking about shrinking it, and you'll see, once you start shrinking it, you'll see you don't need as much as you think you need. And each 5x5 plot, just using that dimension, adds to diversity, adds to your confidence as a rewilder, and then ultimately adds to your neighbors' both confidence, but your neighbors' acceptance of a different look.
So think of it as a throw rug. Like, you should have an area for your picnic, or even like your kids to kick soccer balls, but maybe you can do the edges in something else.
But there isn't really an
But isn't it
alternative.
better to have a sustainable lawn, like Bryant Park, they now use Kentucky bluegrass and I think alfalfa and some others. I mean, not all lawns are equal in terms of the composition.
Right, and that's
of
like,
grass.
don't do that monoculture. I mean, if you have clover and you have things growing in that lawn that get mowed once a week, it is green, but it doesn't require as much input in terms of chemicals to keep it uniform.
And some
So,
grasses need a lot less water.
right, right.
But to keep in mind that it is native plants that increase the biodiversity of an area. And there are both in academia and in practitioners experimenting with lawns that are just of native plants. It hasn't completely taken yet. You can read some studies up at Cornell. So there is some experimentation with it.
But in terms of a place to sit on, like the Great Lawn at Bryant Park now is much more sustainable
Right.
than it used to be, because they've changed what they.
Right, there's seed mix, and also it is that tapestry. People are saying it doesn't have to necessarily be one kind of blade of grass, but just shrinking it.
You mentioned clover. I mean, clover is great as a substitute, but it's not native. Do you consider that okay to grow as a lawn?
I mean, first of all, I'm not an advocate for I just think we need to get away from needing these lawns that require so much. I had clover came into my lawn, I'm okay with it. So I think the way to look at it is plants need to be beneficial. Native plants are obviously the ones that are indigenous to an area are great. Clover does feed, I mean,
It's
a
a
food source.
nitrogen on the soil.
And it's nitrogen, so I wouldn't consider it a thug plant.
You don't have a carpet of clover, but I mean, you don't really need, do you need to water it and, not really?
Not much, no.
Not much.
No. There are clover is a naturalized species. I'm not a purist about native plants. Native plants ecologically are going to give you more bang for your buck if your goal is biodiversity. But if it is moving just away from the lawn, there are different steps, and clover I think is fine. And there's other naturalized species that work too. You don't want to put invasive species in your yard because that would work against your goals.
Okay, I know there's lots of other questions, but we've really run out of time. But I hope, maybe Bram
We'll be
and
around.
Leslie will answer a couple more if you want to come down. But thank you, Bram and Leslie. Thank you. I want to thank Mary Marvin, our videographer Josiah Edwards, the library,